What you're about to witness is one of the most spectacular intellectual collapses in modern political debate. Charlie Kirk, the supposed champion of conservative logic and American values, gets absolutely demolished by a Cambridge student who asks the kind of questions that conservative grifters pray they never have to answer. This isn't your typical college campus confrontation where Kirk gets to dunk on unprepared freshmen with memorized talking points. This is what happens when someone who actually knows what they're talking about forces Kirk to defend the indefensible. Watch as Kirk's entire worldview crumbles under basic moral scrutiny, and his desperation is so obvious that even the audience start to shift uncomfortably. By the end of this exchange, you'll understand exactly why people like Kirk avoid real debates and stick to carefully controlled environments where they can cherry-pick their opponents.
Good evening, Mr. Kirk. You've obviously devoted a lot of your life to electing, keeping in power Donald Trump, and you did so partly because you said Trump would put Americans first and take them out of foreign conflicts. Should we see how that is going at the moment? Currently, Trump has just accepted a $400 million debt from Qatar, which we're assured is perfectly above board. Billions in arms are going to Saudi Arabia, which they're using to bomb and starve Yemeni children. Not sure how that's in the interest of the United States, but it might be in the interest of the $5.5 billion deal his failed sons are receiving. At the same time, this great president of peace has greenlit mass killings not just in Yemen, but in Gaza, where he greenlit an invasion called Operation Gideon's Chariot with the express aim of wiping out the Gazan population. You promised to put America first. Haven't you and your ilk sold America out?
No.
Well, I'm glad you have great intellectual substance and can answer. Because it's all the culture wars for you, isn't it? The second someone actually tells you what you're doing, which is bread.
Can you calm down a little bit? Like, just a little bit. Pounding the table, you're all over the place.
Kirk's first instinct when confronted with substantive criticism isn't to address the arguments, it's to tone police and try to regain control of the narrative. Notice how he immediately tries to portray the student as emotional and unstable, despite the fact that the student just delivered a perfectly coherent and factual critique of Trump's foreign policy contradictions. This is classic right-wing debate tactics. When you can't address the substance, attack the tone. Kirk is essentially admitting that he has no good answers to the corruption allegations, the weapons deals, or the obvious hypocrisy of claiming to be anti-war while supporting massive arms sales to regimes that are actively committing war crimes. So instead, he tries to make the conversation about the student's supposed emotional state rather than Trump's actual policies. It's intellectually bankrupt, and anyone with half a brain can see right through it.
No. You want me to go piece by piece, or would you like me to talk slower?
I think you can...
Number one, Donald Trump is convening a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Joe Biden gave them armaments.
That's going well, isn't it? It's going well.
Can you not interrupt me? Well. I allowed you to talk uninterrupted.
You're famous for not interrupting.
Yeah, I haven't interrupted a single person here today. Can I speak uninterrupted, actually? Okay. He is convening a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. I believe we will see an end to that war. Number two, he's actually talking to Iran and discouraging Israel to strike the interior of Iran and has stopped many other international countries to do the same. Number three, can you give him credit for ending the Indian-Pakistan war?
Both of them said he didn't do that.
Well, hold on a second.
Let's go back.
No, that's important.
Russia, Ukraine.
Hold on, that's important.
Can I speak now?
Yes, but the Indian-Pakistan thing, you got to go deeper than that.
Let's go in order. Is a peace summit where the main person in question, Russia, doesn't show up, is that a success, Mr. Kirk?
I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure.
Is that a success?
Well, again, these are ongoing negotiations, and it's a lot better than when your Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, went alongside our Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, to Istanbul and unnecessarily blew up a potential Russian peace deal, which has resulted in hundreds of thousands of dead Ukrainians.
Kirk's trying to credit Trump with peace negotiations that haven't produced any results while simultaneously blaming previous administrations for the continuation of a war that Trump himself has escalated through increased weapons shipments and aggressive rhetoric. Kirk wants to have it both ways. Trump gets credit for pursuing peace while also getting credit for being tough on Russia. The student's response exposes this perfectly by pointing out the obvious contradiction. If Trump is such a master negotiator, why is Putin so dismissive of his efforts that he won't even show up to peace summits?
One of the great unnecessary wars of the modern era. Donald Trump believes in conversation and police through strength. He has been president for well over 120 to 130 days, and he has already ended a war between two nuclear conflicts of India-Pakistan. He has secured our own U.S. southern border while we were being invaded by foreign powers. And thirdly, he is brokering a potential settlement with Iran that will prevent a major escalation in the Middle East.
This is pure fantasy. Trump has done absolutely nothing to broker any settlement with Iran. In fact, his administration has been escalating tensions through sanctions and threatening rhetoric. Kirk is just making things up at this point, hoping his audience won't fact-check him later. The audacity of claiming Trump is preventing Middle East escalation while simultaneously defending massive arms sales to Saudi Arabia, the same regime that's using American weapons to commit genocide in Yemen, is beyond parody. Kirk apparently thinks his audience is too stupid to notice these glaring contradictions.
And finally, it is very difficult, but I believe they'll get it done, that we'll finally see an end to the Russian-Ukrainian war.
I'm just going to disregard the enormous lies you just put out there about Russia and Ukraine. Okay. But do you really think leverage negotiations work if you cut off all your leverage and scream at one party in the Oval Office? Don't you think that has just emboldened Russia? Because look at the approach. Putin thinks so much of your glorious president, he can't even be asked to show up. You have elected, or help elect, somebody who is at best an idiot and at worst is deeply corrupt.
Okay, again, so Trump and Putin had a 2-hour phone call today. You'll acknowledge that's a good thing. The pursuit of peace can sometimes be a winding road, and it's a lot better than sending hundreds of billions of dollars further into the killing fields of eastern Ukraine, something that tragically both the UK government and the US government has been unnecessarily supporting for a couple of years. President Trump wants to see a brokerage, an ending of this settlement. I pray we can get it. It's very complicated because of the mess that Joe Biden left, which was an active kinetic war with a nuclear power sending American-made missiles into the interior of Russia. So President Trump has already ended a war. He's ended an invasion. He's only 130 days into this. And I believe, we do not know. At this point, we are merely speculating, which I think we should not spend our time doing that, because eventually one of us will be right. I believe we'll be right, and I believe we'll see an end to this war.
Can we just talk about 100 billion's worth of weapons? Because you dodged my question on what was going on in the Middle East, where Trump has just signed enormous arms contracts with Saudi Arabia and with Qatar. And I noticed you ignored the fact that this might have had anything to do with the blatant corruption going on through the Trump coin and going on through giving the very competent sons of Donald Trump billions of investment from Saudi Arabia and Qatar. This is something that is directly embroiling Americans into conflict, but is importantly killing many innocent people. Those nations have been known to terrorize innocent civilian populations. So if you're coming to me and you're objecting to America selling weaponry, why are you defending shilling for the Saudis?
Well, hold on. One is sending weaponry, one is purchasing. Secondly, you do know that the biggest purchase that was announced was commercial airliner, 737, $100 billion. We've heard of Qatar Airways. They purchased $100 billion of commercial airways. You are right, there were some weapons contracts. But I guess the question is, would you rather have Saudi Arabia buy weapons from America or China?
This exchange is absolutely devastating for Kirk, and he knows it. The student has just laid out the obvious corruption. Trump's family is receiving billions in investments from the same countries buying weapons from the US government. This is textbook pay-to-play corruption, and Kirk's response is pathetic. First, he tries to minimize the weapons deals by talking about commercial aircraft purchases, as if selling Boeing jets somehow cancels out selling bombs that are being dropped on Yemeni children. Then he falls back on the weakest possible defense. Well, if we don't sell them weapons, China will. By this logic, American drug dealers are actually performing a public service because if they don't sell drugs, someone else will. Kirk is essentially arguing that America has no choice but to enable war crimes because other countries might enable war crimes instead. It's cowardly, immoral, and completely undermines any claim to moral leadership or principled foreign policy.
I'd rather they not have American weaponry at cut price rates.
See, I disagree.
Let's talk about Qatar for a second.
Okay, fine.
Because you mentioned Qatar. You've been talking a lot about Hamas and the evils of Hamas. Can I ask you, who's the main funder of Hamas?
Well, the Palestine
State?
Well, the West actually funds Hamas.
Which state?
Well, Iran funds.
No.
Also,
where are the Hamas leaders?
Well, and also
where are the Hamas
Qatar
leaders?
funds Hamas.
Yes.
It is a combination
So is
of
this a state we
international
should have
relief
a
organizations.
400 million jet with the President of the United States on it?
Hold on. First of all, it was not given to him personally. I understand the optics of it, but it was not given to him personally. It was given to the U.S. government. And under that standard, no U.S. government should ever receive any gifts from any foreign countries whatsoever. It's not given to him personally and not a violation of the.
Then why is he trying to transfer it to his personal library?
He is. Actually. Okay, again, he sent out a statement. This is way too in the weeds. If you want to keep on going we can.
It's not in the weeds. It's a fundamental moral principle.
Okay, so under that fundamental moral principle then, can you acknowledge, though, that President Trump is getting more done in a less period of time than any president we've seen, while our prior president did not even know what year he got elected? You understand the contrast here?
What aboutism again? I'm not a defender of Biden.
I'm not saying President Trump is far better than the predecessor.
You have to defend the person you spent millions to elect.
I will defend every day of someone who ends an invasion.
That's all you do, is
brings down the price of oil, who is revitalizing the American economy, who is brokering peace, who stopped the potential nuclear war, who is bringing Iran to the table and bringing Russia to the table, someone who does not want armed conflicts with the greatest powers of our time. I will defend that endlessly.
You are living
what are you defending?
in a fantasy world of your own creation. So it's quite hard to engage
with. But then disprove it.
Let's check on how Trump is doing in terms of diplomacy. Look, with the war in the Middle East, do you think it was a defensible decision to tell the Israelis you wanted Trump Gaza, to agree for Israel to invade the Gaza Strip, and to continue to murder thousands of innocent children and civilians in a pointless war? Is that in America's interest? Is that in humanity's interest?
Well, first of all, you should know something about Trump. There's something, if you realize with Trump over the last 10 years, he is quite the social media user and uses hyperbolic language at times. But let me ask you, in the conflict of Israel versus Hamas, who's the good guy?
I believe both Hamas and the Israeli government are evil. But I think also that there is no justification.
Are they equally?
There is no justification for the murder and mutilation of thousands of innocent people and children.
This is where Kirk's moral bankruptcy becomes most obvious. When confronted with the reality of mass civilian casualties in Gaza, his response is to demand that the student pick a side in a simplistic good guys versus bad guys framework. It's the kind of kindergarten-level moral reasoning that you'd expect from someone whose entire worldview is based on comic book narratives. The student's response is infinitely more mature and morally coherent. Both Hamas and the Israeli government can be criticized for their actions, and there's no justification for killing thousands of innocent civilians regardless of who started the conflict. Kirk literally cannot comprehend this basic moral position because his entire political identity is built on tribal loyalty rather than consistent ethical principles.
Well, let's zero in on it. There is no justification, Mr. Kirk, for invading hospitals, for bombing innocent populations and dragging out a war which is damaging Israel and the West's security.
You've made that point, but...
Well, it's not a point, it's a moral truth, isn't it?
Okay, yeah. It was also a moral truth that the war started because 1,300 Jews were killed and 200 were taken hostage. And when you declare war on Israel, expect a firestorm in reaction. Let me finish, I let you talk. Israel had its holiest day of the calendar year besides Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, Samat Torah, the 50-year anniversary of the Six-Day War. On Shabbat, Hamas invaded Israel, deciding to go recklessly to music concerts, to homes, to kibbutzes, and taking 200 plus hostages.
Kirk's historical illiteracy is showing. He's conflating multiple conflicts and getting basic facts wrong while trying to justify collective punishment of an entire population. The idea that killing tens of thousands of civilians is an acceptable response to Hamas's attack is morally repugnant, and Kirk's attempt to dress it up in historical context makes it even worse. He's essentially arguing that the October 7th attack gives Israel a blank check to commit unlimited violence against Palestinians, which is both legally and morally indefensible under international law.
They knew what they were doing. In one of the most cloistered urban environments on the planet, 2 million people live in a place where it's impossible to wage war. Impossible. Where they wear civilian clothing, they violate every tenet of the Geneva Convention, and the IDF, when they do something right, they get no credit. When they do life-saving surgeries of a Gazan child, they get no credit. When they drop leaflets, they get no credit. But when they happen to bomb a place where they are operating their military from, which we now know from third-party verified sources, hundreds of Hamas military operations are in mosques, schools, and hospitals. I'm sorry, the country where they were living in relative peace on October 6th, that all of a sudden we had a war, and Hamas started the war. And I don't see people that were really upset about the 2 million Germans that were killed in World War II, civilians. A tragic truth of war is that civilians die. I don't like it, and you don't like it. And they brought it upon themselves. The only operation and entity to blame is the leadership of Hamas, not the Israeli government, for fighting this defensive war after they were invaded.
I'm no defender of the terrible pogrom that was launched against Jews on that day. But the justification for the death of innocents cannot be an infinite cycle of bloodlust. It cannot be killing tens of thousands of innocent civilians with a war with no end in sight, people who are not complicit in those atrocities. It cannot be bombing hospitals which children use. It cannot be bombing hospitals in which cancer patients are dying and starving in there. The deaths that have been inflicted, nobody knows the true toll, but somewhere between 50 and 100,000 people lie dead under the rubble. And what is left for Gaza except for to continue to suffer under Hamas? Because it turns out Netanyahu's political strategy has not worked. It has entrenched Hamas within the territories. To be a Christian, I would have thought, Mr. Kirk, would never have involved suggesting that the price for an atrocity must be an infinite cycle of bloodlust, that innocent people and the young population must be killed to avenge some kind of providential quest. How can you call yourself a Christian? Well, you just did.
I want to make sure we get our moral clarity straight before we proceed. No one likes what's happening in Gaza. No one with a heart or a soul or a mind likes when kids die. But you must understand who started the conflict so that you could end it correctly.
Here we see Kirk's moral framework completely exposed. He claims to care about children dying, but then immediately justifies their deaths by reference to who started the conflict. This is psychopathic reasoning. The children being killed in Gaza didn't start anything. They're not responsible for Hamas's actions any more than Israeli children are responsible for their government's policies. Kirk is using the same logic that terrorists use to justify targeting civilians. Collective responsibility and historical grievances excuse present-day atrocities. The student is operating from a consistent humanitarian perspective that says civilian casualties are unacceptable regardless of political context, while Kirk is operating from a tribal perspective that says killing the right people is justified if you can construct a narrative about who the bad guys are.
And until Hamas brokers an unconditional surrender, of which they are unwilling to do, they could release the hostages and drop their weapons and their lives would be spared. Instead, they are using children of Gaza as cannon fodder, financed by the Iranian mullahs and dragging the entire world into this conflict. So I don't even know what we're debating at this point other than I believe that Israel, I believe the facts, Israel was unconditionally attacked on October 7th. They're responding in kind. And I would just ask you a very simple moral question. How should Israel have responded?
Not with the blanket carpet bombing of a city, not with bombing hospitals. Of course, some kind of military operation might have been necessary, but not murder on this scale. There is no justification for what is happening with the enormous death toll that is being produced. I really cannot see how you come here and you have the gall to lecture us on Christian morality and then sit here and justify the murder of thousands of civilians. And is it working, Mr. Kirk? Is Hamas dismantled?
I've never said that.
You just did.
Well, no.
This is your whole
in
thing.
war, these are called casualties of a war.
We're going to need to stop bringing this
Again,
to close.
I'm not going to justify every military maneuver of a 100,000 person army. Instead, what I will do is I'll be clear that there is a good guy and there is a bad guy.
This moment perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with Charlie Kirk's worldview. When confronted with the contradiction between his claimed Christian values and his support for mass civilian casualties, he doesn't engage with the moral complexity, he just doubles down on his simplistic good guys versus bad guys narrative. The fact that he calls himself a Christian while defending the killing of children as acceptable casualties of war reveals the complete hollowness of his moral framework. Christianity is supposed to emphasize the value of innocent life and the importance of mercy and forgiveness. Kirk has perverted these teachings into a tribal loyalty test where killing children becomes acceptable as long as you're on the right team.
I honestly...
Isn't that the morality of a child?
Well, hold on. It's interesting you say that, because a child who knows that Israel is the good guy, Hamas is bad, has a lot more wisdom than a student like yourself at Cambridge University.
This is Kirk's final admission of intellectual defeat. When you're reduced to arguing that childish oversimplification is superior to educated moral reasoning, you've lost the argument so completely that you don't even realize it. The student is demonstrating exactly the kind of moral sophistication that should be expected from someone receiving a world-class education: the ability to hold multiple truths in tension, to recognize complexity, and to maintain consistent ethical standards regardless of political convenience. Kirk is arguing that this moral maturity is inferior to the black and white thinking of a child. It's an astonishing cell phone that reveals how fundamentally anti-intellectual the conservative movement has become.
I will be glad that I will not have been somebody who has defended the genocide of the Palestinian people. And I think you will have to reckon one day that you have reckoned with.
Interesting. I want to close on this. So can you tell me what African country is currently ongoing a civil war?
Believe it or not, I know about Sudan because I'm not an idiot.
How about what Southeast Asian country has an ethnic cleansing going on right now?
Myanmar.
Good. And you have strong opinions on both sides?
Unlike you, I take an effort to be informed about foreign policy and to come to conclusions. You are a culture warrior. I believe when everything is done, Mr. Kirk, people will see you and the people you supported as corrupt, as selling the country out to the lowest bidder, and of doing irreparable damage to a country I'm sure we all deep down love.
The difference,
you will have to reckon with that.
Difference
Mr. Kirk.
Is when...
What we've just witnessed isn't simply a debate loss. It's the complete exposure of one of America's most successful political grifters getting his carefully constructed persona absolutely shredded by someone who actually gives a damn about truth. Let's talk about what Charlie Kirk really is: a multi-millionaire who has built an empire on selling moral bankruptcy to college kids while pretending to care about their futures. Kirk didn't stumble into these positions accidentally. This man has personally enriched himself to the tune of millions of dollars by defending policies that get children killed, and when confronted with this reality, his first instinct isn't moral reflection, it's damage control to protect his brand. Turning Point USA, his organization, pulls in over $80 million annually, much of it from dark money donors who profit directly from the military-industrial complex and fossil fuel industries. Kirk isn't defending these policies because he believes in them. He's defending them because opposing them would cost him his lifestyle. Think about the financial incentives at play here. Kirk makes his living by touring college campuses, selling books, running a media empire, and maintaining access to Republican power structures. Every single one of these revenue streams depends on him maintaining his reputation as a loyal Trump defender and conservative warrior. The moment he starts asking serious moral questions about dead children in Gaza or corruption in arms deals, his entire business model collapses. Those dark money checks stop coming. The speaking fees dry up. The book deals disappear. The media appearances end. This is why Kirk's performance was so pathetic. He knows the student is right about the corruption, the civilian casualties, and the moral contradictions. But admitting it would literally cost him millions of dollars. So instead, he doubles down on increasingly absurd talking points, hoping his audience won't notice that he's essentially arguing that killing children is acceptable as long as you can construct a narrative about good guys and bad guys. Let's be specific about Kirk's financial incentives. His organization has received massive donations from fossil fuel companies, defense contractors, and foreign policy hawks who profit directly from the policies he defends. When Kirk defends arms sales to Saudi Arabia, he's not defending American values, he's defending the business interests of his donors. When he justifies civilian casualties in Gaza, he's not making a moral argument, he's protecting relationships with people who write him checks. The student's question about Trump family corruption was particularly devastating because it exposed the entire pay-to-play ecosystem that Kirk participates in. Trump's sons receive billions from Qatar and Saudi Arabia while the US government sells weapons to these same countries. Kirk defends this arrangement not because it's good for America, but because his entire career depends on maintaining the fiction that Trump represents principled leadership rather than naked corruption. This is the dirty secret of the conservative media ecosystem. It's not about ideology, it's about money. Kirk, like Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, and dozens of other conservative influencers, discovered that there's enormous profit in telling conservative audiences what they want to hear, regardless of whether it's true or morally defensible. They've built million-dollar businesses by selling intellectual comfort food to people who want to feel good about supporting policies that would horrify them if they actually understood the consequences. Kirk's retreat into anti-intellectualism when confronted with the Cambridge student's moral reasoning reveals everything about his business model. His audience has been conditioned to distrust education, expertise, and complex thinking because these things threaten the simple narratives that Kirk sells. If his followers start thinking critically about foreign policy, they might start asking uncomfortable questions about why Kirk's positions align so perfectly with the financial interests of weapons manufacturers and authoritarian regimes. The most damning aspect of Kirk's performance is how obviously uncomfortable he becomes when forced to defend actual policy outcomes rather than abstract principles. When the student asks about dead children in Gaza, Kirk immediately tries to change the subject to historical context and tribal loyalty. When asked about corruption in arms deals, he minimizes and deflects. These aren't the responses of someone who believes in what he's saying, they're the responses of someone who's been caught selling something he knows is morally indefensible. Kirk represents an entire generation of young conservatives who could have been genuine leaders if they hadn't discovered how profitable it is to be professional sycophants. Instead of developing real expertise or moral courage, they've learned to monetize outrage and tribal identity. They've built careers on telling people that thinking is overrated and that moral complexity is a liberal conspiracy. Kirk walked into Cambridge University as a supposed intellectual leader of the conservative movement and left as an exposed charlatan whose primary skill is converting human suffering into speaking fees. The student didn't just win a debate, he performed a public service by showing exactly what these grifters look like when they can't control the conversation or cherry-pick their opponents. The real question is whether Kirk's audience will learn anything from watching their hero get intellectually demolished by someone half his age. Will they start asking why someone who claims to care about Christian values spends his time defending child killing and corruption? Will they wonder why Kirk's positions align so perfectly with the interests of his wealthy donors? Or will they double down on the anti-intellectualism that keeps the grift alive? Charlie Kirk left this debate exactly what he came in as, a moral prostitute who has discovered that selling his conscience pays better than keeping it. The difference is that now everyone can see the price tag.